The morning Thomas Reed discovered he held the fate of two species in his hands, he was fixing the water recycler in Sector 7 of the Mars Colony Research Station. The wrench slipped from his grease-stained fingers as the emergency klaxon screamed through the underground corridors, echoing off the metal walls like the cry of some mechanical beast. Sarah Chen found him there 20 minutes later, her lab coat still pristine despite running through half the station. Her dark eyes were wide with excitement and fear as she grabbed his arm. "Tom, you need to come to the observation deck. Now." Her voice carried that particular tremor it got when she was trying to process something beyond her considerable scientific understanding. Thomas wiped his hands on his coveralls and followed her through the winding passages of humanity's newest foothold in the solar system. They had been together for 3 years now, ever since she had arrived as the colony's chief xenobiologist. She was brilliant, funny, and one of the few people who could make him laugh, even when the recyclers were acting up and half the colony was complaining about the water tasting like metal shavings. The observation deck was crowded with every scientist, engineer, and administrator in the colony. They stood pressed against the reinforced windows, staring up at the rust-colored sky of Mars. Thomas pushed through the crowd until he could see what had captured everyone's attention. A ship hung in the thin atmosphere above them. It was unlike anything humans had ever built, all flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to shift and shimmer like liquid metal. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight, like looking at a sunset over the Grand Canyon, or watching Sarah work late in her lab, completely absorbed in some fascinating discovery. "First contact," someone whispered behind him. Dr. Martinez, the station commander, was already coordinating with Earth. The communication delay meant any conversation would take 45 minutes minimum. For now, they were on their own. The ship descended slowly, its movements graceful and deliberate. It settled onto the landing pad that had been built optimistically, but never used, fitting perfectly as if it had been designed specifically for that purpose. The coincidence sent a chill down Thomas's spine. "Look at the hull composition readings," Sarah murmured, checking her tablet. "The metal has properties we have never seen before. It is almost like it is alive." Within an hour, the aliens had requested permission to send a delegation inside the station. They communicated through mathematical equations projected as light patterns on their ship's hull, a universal language that even the colony's modest xenolinguistics team could interpret. The delegation consisted of only one individual. When the airlock cycled open, Thomas felt his world tilt off its axis. The alien was humanoid, but unmistakably other. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, with skin that held a faint silver luminescence and hair that moved like it was underwater even though there was no breeze. Her eyes were large and dark, holding depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. But it was the sadness in those eyes that struck him. It was a sadness so profound that it made his chest ache just to look at her. "I am Lyra Lee of the 13th Fleet," she said in perfect English, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I come seeking Thomas Reed of Earth." The crowd turned to stare at him. Thomas felt his mouth go dry. "That's me. But how do you know my name?" Lyra Lee approached him with steps that seemed to barely touch the ground. When she was close enough that he could smell something like jasmine and starlight emanating from her skin, she spoke again. "Because you are the key to my species' survival. You are the last hope for the Etherian people, and I have traveled 7,000 light years to find you." The silence in the observation deck was absolute. Thomas could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Sarah's hand found his arm, her grip tight enough to leave marks. "I think there has been some mistake," Thomas said. "I am just a maintenance engineer. I fix things that break. I am not anyone special." Lyra Lee's expression remained serene, but the sadness in her eyes deepened. "You are more than you know, Thomas Reed. Your genetic pattern holds a unique configuration that appeared in our predictions 3 centuries ago. Our greatest seers foresaw that when our species faced extinction, salvation would come from a world called Earth, from a man with your exact genetic signature. Dr. Martinez stepped forward. What kind of extinction are we talking about? Lyra turned to address the room, but her eyes kept returning to Thomas. My people are dying. We have lived for millions of years, but our reproductive capabilities have been failing for the past 1,000. Each generation produces fewer children, and those children are weaker than their parents. Our scientists estimate we have perhaps 50 years before the last Etherian dies. She reached into a fold of her clothing that Thomas had not noticed before and withdrew a device that looked like a crystal sculpture. It projected holographic images into the air above their heads. Thomas saw cities that floated in clouds of rainbow light, beings of impossible grace tending to gardens that defied physics, children with Lyra's luminescent skin playing games that involved manipulating gravity itself. This is what we will lose, she said. Millions of years of art, science, and culture. The accumulated wisdom of a species that has seen the birth and death of countless stars. All of it will disappear unless we can find a way to revive our genetic diversity. The images changed to show laboratories and medical facilities. Etherian scientists worked frantically over complex equipment, their movements conveying desperate urgency even through the hologram. We have tried everything our science knows. Genetic manipulation, cloning, artificial reproduction. Nothing works. The decay is too fundamental, too deeply rooted in our very essence. But our seers spoke of a solution that would come from beyond our understanding. Thomas felt the weight of every eye in the room. And you think I am that solution? I know you are. Lyra touched the device again, and the hologram showed a double helix structure that Thomas recognized as DNA, though it was far more complex than human genetics. Your species possesses something we lost eons ago, a genetic vitality, a creative chaos that we bred out of ourselves in our pursuit of perfection. If you were to mate with one of our females, the offspring would carry both our accumulated wisdom and your species' vital spark. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Sarah's grip on his arm tightened until it was painful. You are asking him to father a hybrid child, Dr. Martinez said. I am asking him to father many children, Lyra corrected gently. Your genetic pattern is compatible with 17 of our females, including myself. Each pairing would likely produce between 3 and 5 viable offspring. Within a generation, we could restore our species to sustainability. Thomas felt dizzy. And what happens to me in this arrangement? You would come with me to our homeworld. You would be honored above all others, given every comfort and privilege our society can provide. You would be the savior of an entire species, remembered and revered for all time. And if I refuse? The sadness in Lyra's eyes became overwhelming. Then my people die, and the universe loses something irreplaceable. But the choice is yours, Thomas Reed. I cannot compel you. I can only ask and hope that your species' compassion is as remarkable as your genetic vitality. Sarah spoke for the first time since the aliens had arrived. Her voice was steady, but Thomas could hear the tremor underneath. How long do we have to decide? My ship can remain in orbit for 7 of your days before we must begin the journey home. The longer we delay, the fewer of my people will live to see the first hybrid children. The meeting broke up in chaos as everyone tried to speak at once. Dr. Martinez called for order and began organizing committees to study the situation from every possible angle. Scientists wanted to examine Lyra's ship and technology. Military advisors worried about the strategic implications of contact with an advanced alien species. Ethicists debated the morality of the choice being offered. Through it all, Thomas stood frozen in the center of the storm, feeling like the eye of a hurricane. The weight of an entire species' survival pressed down on him like a physical burden. Sarah pulled him away from the crowd and into an empty corridor. For a long moment, they just stood there, both trying to process what they had just learned. "This is insane," she finally said. "They want you to leave Earth, leave your entire life behind, to become some kind of breeding stock for aliens." Thomas nodded, though he was not sure he agreed with her characterization. There was something noble about Lyrelay, something that made him believe this was not about exploitation, but about desperate hope. "But if I do not," he said quietly, "an entire species dies. Millions of years of civilization just disappears." "That is not your responsibility, Tom. You did not cause their problems, and you are not obligated to sacrifice your life to fix them." He looked at her then, really looked at her. Sarah Chen was beautiful, brilliant, and everything he could want in a partner. They had talked about marriage, about having children together once their tour on Mars was complete. They had planned a future that now seemed impossibly distant. "What if it was humanity?" he asked. "What if we were the ones facing extinction, and there was one alien who could save our entire species? Would not we hope they would make that sacrifice?" Sarah's face crumpled. "Do not ask me to be noble about this, Tom. I love you. I have loved you since the day you fixed my broken spectrometer and stayed up all night helping me salvage 3 months of research. I cannot just smile and send you off to save aliens I have never met." Before he could respond, Lyrelai appeared at the end of the corridor. Her movements were so quiet that neither of them had heard her approach. "I apologize for interrupting," she said, "but I wanted to speak with both of you before you made any decisions." She approached slowly, as if afraid she might frighten them. "I understand this request places you in an impossible position. In our study of human culture, we learned about your concept of romantic love, of pair bonding between individuals. We do not have an exact equivalent in our society." "How convenient," Sarah said, her voice sharp with pain. Lyrelay's expression remained patient. "You misunderstand. I did not say we do not experience love. I said we do not have pair bonding. We love all our people equally, as parents love children or siblings love each other. What you call romantic love is foreign to us, but not incomprehensible." She looked directly at Sarah. "I can see that you and Thomas share something precious. I do not wish to destroy that, but I also cannot watch my people die when salvation is within reach." "Then what are you suggesting?" Thomas asked. Lyrelai was quiet for a long moment, her strange eyes reflecting some internal struggle. "I am suggesting that perhaps there is another way. Our seers spoke of salvation coming from Earth, but they did not specify the exact form it would take. Your genetic pattern is the key, but perhaps it does not require your physical presence on our world." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "Genetic material can be preserved, stored, transported. With samples of your DNA and access to your species' reproductive technology, we might be able to create the hybrid children on our homeworld without requiring you to leave yours." Thomas felt a flutter of hope. "That could work?" "It is possible," Lyrelai said carefully, "but it is far less certain than natural reproduction. The success rate would be lower, and we do not know how well the genetic material would preserve during the journey to our world. It would be a risk we have never taken before." "But it is a chance," Sarah said, "a way to save your people without destroying our life together." Lyrelai nodded. "It is a chance. But I must be honest with you. Our analysis suggests the natural approach would have perhaps an 80% chance of success. This alternative might have a 20% chance, possibly less." The corridor fell silent, except for the distant hum of the station's life support systems. Thomas could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him again, but now there was at least a possibility of compromise. "How much time do we have to decide?" he asked. "The same 7 days," Lyrelai said. "But I would need to begin preparations immediately if you choose the alternative approach. We would need to construct specialized storage and transport containers, and I would need to contact our medical specialists." She paused, her luminescent skin seeming to dim slightly. "There is one more thing you should know. If you choose to come with me, you would not be alone among strangers. Our people are capable of great affection, even if we do not experience romantic love as you do. You would be cherished and cared for." "But I would never see Earth again," Thomas said. It was not really a question. "The journey between our worlds takes 3 years each way using our fastest ships. It would be possible to visit, but it would not be frequent." Sarah made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. 3 years each way. By the time you made one round trip, we would both be middle-aged." The conversation ended there, with all three of them staring at each other across a gap that seemed to span galaxies. Lorelei excused herself gracefully, leaving Thomas and Sarah alone with the weight of an impossible decision. That night, Thomas lay awake in his narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling of his quarters. Through the small porthole, he could see stars scattered across the Martian sky like diamonds on black velvet. Somewhere among those stars was Lorelei's homeworld, where an entire species waited to learn if they would live or die based on his choice. In the bunk across from him, Sarah was also awake. He could tell by her breathing that she was not sleeping, but neither of them spoke. What was there to say? They both understood the situation perfectly. An entire species balanced on one side of the scales, their personal happiness on the other. When morning came, they would have 6 days left to D. The next 3 days passed in a blur of tests, meetings, and sleepless nights. Dr. Martinez had assembled teams to study every aspect of the situation, from medical, ethical, and strategic perspectives. The communications lag with Earth meant they were essentially making decisions in isolation, though the initial response from the World Council had been predictably chaotic. Thomas found himself subjected to more medical examinations than he had endured in his entire life. Blood samples, genetic analysis, psychological evaluations, and physical assessments. The colony's medical bay had never been busier, and Dr. Patel worked around the clock to understand exactly what made Thomas so special. "Your genetic markers are indeed unique," Dr. Patel explained as she showed him the results on her tablet. "There are specific sequences that we have never seen before, combinations that should not exist according to our understanding of human genetics." "What does that mean?" Thomas asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "It means you are a 1 in 7 billion anomaly. Your genetic pattern carries markers from at least a dozen different ethnic backgrounds, but they are combined in ways that suggest your ancestry includes bloodlines we cannot trace. It is as if your DNA contains elements from populations that never mixed, or perhaps from groups that disappeared from the historical record." Sarah sat beside him, studying the readouts with the focused intensity she usually reserved for her most important research. Could he have inherited something from an earlier contact? Some kind of genetic legacy from a previous alien encounter that we do not know about? Dr. Patel shrugged. It is possible. There are gaps in the human genetic record, populations that vanished without trace, or perhaps this is simply an extremely rare natural occurrence, the kind of genetic lottery that happens once in a species' lifetime. Meanwhile, Lorelei had proven to be an unexpectedly gracious guest. She spent hours answering questions about Etherian science and culture, sharing knowledge that would have taken human civilization centuries to discover on its own. Her people had mastered faster-than-light travel, energy manipulation, and biotechnology that seemed like magic. But for all their advanced capabilities, they had lost something fundamental that humans possessed in abundance: genetic chaos. The Etherians had achieved perfection through careful breeding programs that lasted millennia, eliminating disease, extending lifespans, and enhancing intelligence. In the process, they had also eliminated the random variations that kept a species viable. "We thought we were improving ourselves," Lyrale explained as she shared holographic records of Etherian history. Each generation was stronger, smarter, more beautiful than the last. We eliminated suffering and want, created a society where every individual could reach their full potential. The images showed a civilization of impossible beauty. Crystal cities that floated among the clouds, individuals who moved like dancers and thought like philosophers, art that transcended anything humans had ever created. It was a paradise that had taken millions of years to build. But perfection has a price, she continued. We became too specialized, too refined. Like a garden where only the most beautiful flowers are allowed to grow, we eliminated the wild variations that keep a species adaptable. Now we are like cut flowers, beautiful but dying. Thomas found himself drawn to these conversations despite the weight of the decision they implied. Lyrale was fascinating in a way that had nothing to do with her alien nature. She was intelligent, thoughtful, and carried herself with a dignity that never slipped into arrogance. Under other circumstances, he might have found her attractive in an aesthetic way, like admiring a work of art. But it was not attraction he felt. It was responsibility, and that was somehow worse. On the fourth day, Sarah made an announcement that changed everything. "I want to test the genetic storage approach," she told the assembled team. "If we can make it work, everyone gets what they want." Dr. Patel looked up from her notes. The success rate would be significantly lower. 20% is better than 0, Sarah said firmly. And if it does not work, Thomas can still make the other choice. Lyrale tilted her head in that way she had when considering new information. You would be willing to help develop this approach, even though it might fail? I am a xenobiologist, Sarah said. This is the discovery of a lifetime. Helping two species find a way to coexist and preserve genetic diversity? How could I not want to be part of that? But Thomas could see the truth behind her professional enthusiasm. Sarah was fighting for their future the only way she knew how, using her scientific expertise to find a third option that did not exist when they started. The work began immediately. Sarah and Dr. Baka Patel worked with Lyrale to understand Etherian reproductive biology, while the engineering team designed cryogenic storage systems that could preserve genetic material for the 3-year journey. It was a long shot, but it was something to hope for. Thomas threw himself into the work as well, though his contributions were more practical than scientific. He helped design the storage containers, calibrated the environmental systems, and made sure everything would function reliably during the long journey. It felt good to work with his hands again, to solve problems that had clear mechanical solutions. But as the days passed, it became increasingly clear that the technical challenges were immense. Etherian biology was far more complex than human reproduction, involving genetic mechanisms that earthly science barely understood. The storage systems would have to maintain precise conditions for 3 years without any possibility of repair or adjustment. The failure rate for the storage system alone is about 30%, the engineering team reported. Even if we solve all the biological challenges, there is a significant chance the material will not survive the journey. And we still do not understand how Etherian-human genetic combination would actually work, Dr. Patel added. We can make educated guesses based on their biological scans, but we are essentially trying to perform unprecedented interspecies genetic engineering with no opportunity for testing. On the 5th day, Lyrale called Thomas aside for a private conversation. They walked to the observation deck, which had become her favorite place in the station. She seemed drawn to the view of Mars' desolate landscape, though she never explained why. Your people have been working very hard to find an alternative, she said without preamble. I appreciate their efforts, and I am grateful for Sarah's dedication to helping my species. But? Thomas asked, sensing there was more. But I must be honest with you about the chances of success. Even if we solve all the technical problems, the genetic storage approach will likely fail. Our medical specialists have been running simulations based on the data your team has provided. The probability of success is closer to 5%, not 20%. Thomas felt his heart sink. Why have not you told the others? Because they are trying so hard, and I do not want to destroy their hope unless it becomes necessary. But you deserve to know the truth. Lyra turned to face him, her luminescent skin seeming to glow more brightly in the artificial light. My people are going to die, Thomas Reed, unless you come with me. This will be the last generation of Etherians in the universe. The weight of that statement hit him like a physical blow. An entire species, millions of years of accumulated knowledge and culture, all depending on his decision. I know what I am asking of you, Lyra continued. I am asking you to give up everything you know and love to save people you have never met. I am asking you to sacrifice your happiness for the survival of strangers. It is not fair, and it is not something anyone should have to choose. But it is my choice to make, Thomas said quietly. Yes, and whatever you decide, I will honor it. If you refuse, I will return to my people and tell them that Earth offered what help they could. No one will blame you for choosing your own life over ours. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the Martian landscape. In the growing darkness, Thomas could see Lyralai's ship hanging in orbit above them, waiting to carry either hope or despair back to her dying world. Tell me about them, he said. About your people. What are they like? Lyralai's expression softened. They are kind, in their way. We do not experience emotions as intensely as humans do, but we care for each other deeply. Our society has no crime, no war, no suffering that we can prevent. Every individual is valued for their unique contributions. She activated her holographic device, showing him scenes of daily life on her homeworld. Etherians tended floating gardens that produced food and beauty in equal measure. They created art that used light and sound and gravity as mediums. Their children learned by playing games that taught them to manipulate the fundamental forces of physics. We have no families in the human sense, Lyralai explained. Children are raised by the community, learning from anyone who has knowledge to share. We do not experience the possessive love that humans feel for their offspring, but we love them nonetheless in our way. It sounds lonely, Thomas said. Perhaps. But it is also peaceful. We have eliminated jealousy, anger, the destructive emotions that cause so much pain for your species. The cost is that we also eliminated the chaotic vitality that keeps a species alive. The images changed to show Etherian libraries and research facilities. Their knowledge was vast, accumulated over millions of years of careful study and experimentation. They had unlocked secrets of the universe that humanity would not discover for millennia, if ever. All of that knowledge would be lost? Thomas asked. Not all. We have prepared archives, genetic repositories, recordings of our greatest achievements. Something would survive even if our species does not. But it would be like preserving the skeleton of a civilization while letting its soul die. That night, Thomas had the conversation with Sarah that he had been dreading since Lyralai's arrival. They sat in the small common area of their shared quarters, both of them exhausted from the constant stress of the past 5 days. The storage approach is not going to work, he said without preamble. Lyralai told me the real success rate. It is maybe 5%. Sarah's face went pale. 5%? She did not want to destroy everyone's hope, but she thought I deserved to know the truth. For a long moment, Sarah stared at her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with tears. So, it comes down to the original choice after all. Yeah? Are you going to go with her? The question hung in the air between them like a sword. Thomas realized that despite all the discussions and analysis and planning, He still did not know what he was going to do. "I do not know," he said honestly. "Part of me thinks I have to. How can I let an entire species die when I could save them? But part of me thinks I am crazy for even considering giving up my life for aliens I have never met." Sarah was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "I have been thinking about what you said the first day, about what we would want if humanity was facing extinction. And you are right. We would want someone to make that sacrifice." "Sarah." "No, let me finish." She took his hands in hers, her grip warm and desperate. "You are a good man, Tom. Better than you know. You fix things that are broken. You help people when they need it. And you would rather sacrifice yourself than let others suffer. It is one of the reasons I love you." She took a shaky breath. "But I am not that good. I am selfish and human and in love with you, and I cannot bear the thought of losing you. So I'm going to ask you to do something that might be wrong." Thomas felt his chest tighten. "What?" Sarah looked directly into his eyes, and when she spoke, her voice carried a desperate determination that he had never heard before. "Marry me, Tom. Right now, tonight, before you can make a decision you will regret forever. Dr. Martinez can perform the ceremony. We can call it a field wedding, an emergency authorization. Once we are married, once we have made that commitment to each other, maybe it will be easier to choose us over them." The request hit him like a shockwave. "Sarah, I know it is not fair. I know it is emotional manipulation and probably morally wrong, but I love you and I want a life with you. And I cannot just stand by and watch you sacrifice yourself for people who will never even know your name." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she spoke faster, the words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. "We could have children together, Tom. Human children who carry your unique genetics into the future. Maybe our descendants will be the ones to develop better spaceflight, to reach other species and help them the way you want to help the Etherians. Maybe the choice is not between saving them or having a life with me. Maybe the choice is between saving them now or saving everyone later." Thomas felt like he was drowning. The desperate love in Sarah's voice was like an anchor pulling him down into depths he could not escape. She was right that it was manipulation, but it was also honest. She was fighting for their future with everything she had, using the only weapons available to her. "Is that what you really think?" he asked. "Or are you just trying to give me a reason to stay?" "Both," she said without hesitation. "I am trying to save our relationship, but I also think I am right. You are special, Tom, but maybe not in the way the Etherians think. Maybe your genetics are just the beginning. Maybe what makes you special is your humanity, your willingness to sacrifice for others. That could be something worth preserving for the future." The common area fell silent, except for the ever-present hum of the life support systems. Through the small porthole, Thomas could see stars scattered across the Martian sky, each one representing impossible distances and unimaginable possibilities. "You are asking me to choose between definitely saving an alien species and possibly having some undefined future impact on human development," he said. "I am asking you to marry the woman who loves you and have faith that human ingenuity will find other ways to help when the time comes." Thomas closed his eyes and tried to think clearly, but all he could hear was the desperate hope in Sarah's voice and the memory of infinite sadness in Lyralay's alien eyes. Two women, two species, two futures balanced on the edge of his decision. When he opened his eyes, Sarah was watching him with an expression that mixed hope and terror in equal measure. She was offering him everything she had to give, putting her heart and her future entirely in his hands. The question was whether love was enough to justify letting an entire civilization die. The question was whether he could live with either choice. Tomorrow was the last day. By tomorrow night, he would have to decide. The weight of two worlds pressed down on him as he looked into Sarah's tear-streaked face and tried to find an answer that did not exist. In 12 hours, he would either be preparing for a wedding or preparing for a 3-year journey to a dying world. Either way, nothing would ever be the same. He sighed. 6 days to choose between love and duty, between personal fulfillment and cosmic responsibility. 6 days to determine the fate of two worlds. As Thomas finally drifted toward sleep, he found himself thinking about the sadness in Lyra Leigh's eyes. It was the sadness of someone who had already lost everything that mattered and was now faced with losing the last hope of getting it back. He wondered if he would be able to live with himself if he was the reason that sadness became permanent. Thomas did not sleep that night. He sat by the porthole in his quarters, watching the stars wheel slowly across the Martian sky, while Sarah slept fitfully beside him. Her proposal hung in the air between them like a challenge to the universe itself. By morning, he still had not given her an answer. The final day began with an emergency message from Earth. The 45-minute communication delay meant the response was already hours old by the time it reached them, but the content was clear. Earth's governments had reached a unanimous decision. They wanted Thomas to go with Lyra Leigh. The potential benefits to humanity from a formal alliance with an advanced alien species outweigh other considerations, the message stated in the cold language of diplomatic necessity. Thomas Reed is hereby designated as Earth's ambassador to the Etherian people, with full authority to negotiate technological exchange agreements and establish formal diplomatic relations. Dr. Martinez delivered the news to the assembled station personnel with barely concealed disgust. "They are treating you like a trading commodity," he said bluntly. "Offer up one human in exchange for alien technology." "That is not entirely unfair," Thomas replied. "The Etherians have medical knowledge that could extend human lifespan by centuries. Their energy technology could solve our environmental problems. Their faster-than-light travel could open up the galaxy to human exploration. And all it costs is your life," Sarah said bitterly. "It would not be my death. It would be a different life. A life without anyone you know or love, serving as a genetic donor for aliens who cannot even understand human emotions." The argument might have continued, but Lyra Leigh appeared in the doorway of the conference room. She moved with that ethereal grace that still made everyone stop and stare, but Thomas noticed something different about her today. The luminescent quality of her skin seemed dimmed, and the sadness in her large eyes had deepened. "I apologize for interrupting," she said, "but I have received a message from my homeworld that changes everything." Dr. Martinez gestured for her to continue. Lyra Leigh activated her holographic device, and the air filled with images of her crystalline cities. But these were not the beautiful, peaceful scenes she had shown before. These cities were dying. "Our population decline has accelerated beyond our projections," she explained, her voice maintaining its musical quality even as she delivered devastating news. 3 more breeding colonies have failed completely in the past week. Our medical specialists now estimate we have perhaps 20 years remaining, not 50. The hologram showed empty streets where crowds once gathered, gardens tended by machines because there were not enough Etherians left to care for them, and laboratories where desperate scientists worked alone on problems that once required teams. The message also contained new genetic analysis, Lyra Leigh continued. "Our specialists have determined that even with Thomas's contribution, we can only save perhaps 30% of our population. The genetic decay has progressed too far for a complete recovery." Thomas felt the weight on his shoulders shift and multiply. Now it was not just about saving a species, but about witnessing its slow death, even if he succeeded. "But there is more," Lyra Leigh said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The message included a proposal from our High Council. They want to know if humanity would be willing to accept Etherian refugees. The room fell silent. Dr. Martinez was the first to find his voice. Refugees? If our homeworld becomes uninhabitable, if our population drops below sustainable levels, would your species consider allowing survivors to settle on human worlds? We could offer our knowledge and technology in exchange for a place to live out our remaining generations. Sarah looked stunned. How many survivors are we talking about? Perhaps 1,000 individuals? No more. We would not be a burden on your resources, and our technology could benefit your species tremendously. But we would be asking for sanctuary among strangers, in a universe where we no longer have a home. Thomas stared at the holographic images of the dying cities and felt something shift inside his chest. This was not just about genetic salvation anymore. This was about two species finding a way to survive together, to preserve something precious even as the universe tried to take it away. What would that look like? He asked. Etherians living among humans? We do not know, Lirelei admitted. It has never been tried before. We would need to learn to live with emotions we do not understand, in societies built around concepts like family and romantic love that are foreign to us. It would be difficult for both species. But possible? Dr. Martinez asked. Perhaps, if both sides were willing to make the effort. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the communication system. Dr. Patel's voice filled the room with barely contained excitement. Thomas! Sarah! Dr. Martinez! Please come to the medical bay immediately. We have made a breakthrough. They found Dr. Patel surrounded by holographic displays showing complex genetic structures. Her usually meticulous hair was disheveled, and her eyes had the slightly manic gleam of someone who had not slept in days. I have been running simulations on the genetic storage approach, she said without preamble, and I found something extraordinary. Thomas's genetic pattern is not just compatible with Etherian biology, it is actually complementary to it. What does that mean? Sarah asked. It means the Etherian's genetic problems and Thomas's unique markers are like two halves of a puzzle. Their species lost genetic diversity through over-refinement. Thomas carries genetic chaos markers that suggest his ancestry includes bloodlines that were eliminated from most human populations. Dr. Patel manipulated the holographic displays, showing how different genetic sequences would interact. If we could introduce Thomas's genetic material into the Etherian gene pool, it would not just provide new diversity. It would actually repair some of the damage their selective breeding has caused. But the storage approach still has the same problems, Thomas said. The journey time, the technical difficulties. That is where it gets interesting. Dr. Patel's smile was triumphant. I have been working with the engineering team, and we think we have solved the transportation problem. We do not need to store genetic material for 3 years. We need to store it for 3 weeks. Everyone stared at her. 3 weeks? Dr. Martinez asked. The Etherian ship can carry one of our cryogenic pods. If Thomas comes with us to their homeworld, we can preserve enough genetic material here for multiple attempts at the hybrid breeding program. When they return to their world, they will have Thomas for natural reproduction and preserved material for laboratory work. But that still means Thomas has to go with them, Sarah said quietly. Not necessarily. Dr. Patel turned to Lirelei. How often do your ships travel between our worlds? Lirelei considered this. If we establish a formal relationship between our species, perhaps once every few years, more often if the situation requires it. Then we establish a breeding program that spans both worlds, Dr. Patel said excitedly. Thomas spends time on the Etherian homeworld, helping establish the initial hybrid population, then returns to Earth. Future trips can carry additional genetic material, and some of the hybrid children could eventually be brought to Earth to ensure genetic diversity in both directions. Sarah's face lit up with the first genuine hope Thomas had seen in days. A rotation system. Thomas could still come home. It would take longer to save the Etherian species, Dr. Patel continued, but it would save them, and it would establish a permanent relationship between our peoples that could benefit both species for millennia. Thomas felt his heart racing as the implications sank in. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a human solution. Instead of choosing between love and duty, they had found a way to honor both. "What do you think?" he asked Lyrelai. The Etherian was quiet for a long moment, her large eyes reflecting some internal calculation. "It could work," she said finally. "It would require significant changes to our original plans, but it could work. My people would need to accept that salvation would come slowly, over multiple generations, but it would come. And you would be willing to help humans establish colonies on other worlds, share your technology and knowledge?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Of course. If your species is willing to help preserve ours, we would do everything in our power to help yours thrive." Thomas looked around the room at the faces of people who had spent the past week wrestling with an impossible problem. Dr. Patel, brilliant and determined, refusing to accept that there was no solution. Dr. Martinez, gruff but caring, fighting to protect his people while doing what was right. Sarah, fierce in her love and unwilling to give up without a fight. This was what humans did. When faced with impossible choices, they found impossible solutions. When the universe presented them with problems that had no answer, they changed the questions until there was an answer. They refused to accept that anyone had to lose everything, that love and duty could not coexist. "I need to ask Sarah something," Thomas said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. He took Sarah's hands in his, feeling the calluses from years of careful scientific work, the warmth of her skin, the slight tremor of nervousness. "You asked me to marry you to keep me here," he said. "But I want to ask you something different. Will you marry me knowing that I have to leave, that I will be gone for months or years at a time, that our life together will be complicated and difficult and unlike anything any human couple has ever experienced?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. "Are you proposing to me? I am proposing to you. I am asking you to be my wife, to build a life with me that spans star systems, to help me save an alien species while building our own future. I am asking you to take the most impossible job in human history, being married to the galaxy's first interspecies diplomat." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." They kissed then, right there in the medical bay in front of everyone, and Thomas felt like he was tasting starlight. When they broke apart, the entire room was smiling. "Well," Dr. Martinez said gruffly, "I guess I am performing a wedding ceremony tonight." "And tomorrow?" Lyrelai asked. Thomas looked at her, this strange and beautiful representative of a dying species who had traveled impossible distances to find hope in the most unlikely place. "Tomorrow we start building a future that neither of our species could have imagined alone." The wedding ceremony took place that evening in the observation deck, with Mars hanging in the sky like a red jewel, and Lyrelai's ship visible as a star that moved among the constellations. Dr. Martinez, wearing his dress uniform for the first time since arriving at the colony, performed a ceremony that was part traditional human marriage and part interstellar treaty signing. "Do you, Thomas Reed, take Sarah Chen to be your wife, knowing that your union represents not just your love for each other but humanity's commitment to building bridges across the galaxy?" "I do." "Do you, Sarah Chen, take Thomas Reed to be your husband, knowing that your marriage will help preserve one species while advancing another?" "I do." "Then, by the authority vested in me by the Mars Colonial Authority and witnessed by representatives of two worlds, I pronounce you husband and wife." The kiss that sealed their marriage was witnessed by humans and alien alike, under stars that seemed to shine more brightly in celebration of an impossible love story that had found its perfect ending. 3 days later, Thomas boarded Lyralay's ship for the first time, carrying with him carefully preserved genetic material and detailed plans for the breeding program. He also carried a picture of Sarah and a wedding ring that had been fashioned from rare metals found in the Martian soil. As the ship lifted off from Mars and began its journey to a world where no human had ever been, Thomas looked back at the small red planet that had become the birthplace of interstellar civilization. Somewhere down there, Sarah was already working on plans for the next phase of the program, designing systems that would make future trips faster and more efficient. "Are you ready?" Lyralay asked, as they entered hyperspace, and the stars around them began to stretch into lines of light. Thomas thought about the question. He was leaving behind everything he had ever known to help save a species he had just met. He was married to a woman he would only see a few months out of every year. He was about to become father to children who were half alien and would grow up in a world he could barely imagine. It was the most terrifying, exciting, impossible adventure any human had ever undertaken. "Yeah," he said, watching the light show outside the ship's viewports. "I am ready." Behind them, Earth and Mars continued their ancient dance around the sun, carrying the seeds of a civilization that had just learned it was not alone in the universe. Ahead lay a dying world that was about to discover what humans meant when they said impossible was just another word for challenging. The future stretched before them like a bridge of stars, built from love and hope and the stubborn human refusal to accept that anyone had to lose everything. It would be difficult, complicated, and unlike anything either species had ever attempted. It would be perfect. Years later, when historians tried to explain how humanity's first contact with alien life had led not to conquest or submission, but to the galaxy's most successful interspecies partnership, they would trace it back to a single moment, when a maintenance engineer from Mars looked at an impossible choice and decided to change the rules instead. That was what humans did. They fixed things that were broken, even when those things were the laws of the universe itself. And sometimes, if they were very lucky and very stubborn and very much in love, they succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. The decision would have to be made soon. The question was whether he would have the strength to make the right choice, whatever that choice might be.